Hello, my name's Stephanie Toman and I run the ICDL programme. The demonstration I'm going to do for you today is for the lecture on Access, Module 5. What we're going to look at is, if we have a look at the slide, what we're covering are going to be the following. Database principles. This is because there is always a multiple choice aspect to the test at the beginning, so you need to understand some of those principles. There's creating a simple database. I'm going to do that one for you so you get an overview of Access. If you've never met it before, been invited to do it. Then we're going to look at the database design and field properties. That's in the back end. And we do that by using an existing database a bit larger than the other one. We're going to look at editing, searching, sorting. We're going to create some table relationships and look at those different relationships in a bit more detail than what we've done in a simple database. And then look again at forms, queries and reports in much more detail than we've done in creating a simple database. So it's going to give you a good overall look at it and how you need to meet the syllabus with regard to your test and your test questions. Okay, so what you need is you need the lecture materials for Access. So what you should see is a part 1 and 2, and you may not see the part 1 and 2 bit, that's my bit, but I'm going to make sure you see demo clubs and then the slides for module 5. So we're going to look at the slides for module 5 first. Okay, so MS Access 2016 is the software we're using. Module 5 of the ICDL modules group, there's 7 in total, this is number 5. And I've got some areas here that we're going to look at that connect up to what we looked at a little bit earlier, but these are a bit more detail. What I'd like to do on this is show you these slides are available. So they are here for you to access. And as you can see, if I scroll down, there are quite a lot of them. They're very visual and they do give you an overview of everything that I'm going to demonstrate. So it's another way of looking at it, or a way of looking at it outside of a video. To begin with, however, what I need to do is go over some of the database principles. So these are the multiple choice areas within the exam, usually at the beginning. So last question is like, a database is an organisation collection of information. And they may be asking you, what is a database? So you need to look for language like that. You'll have 4 possible answers and you need to select one that is the most likely. If you think about a large database as the old telephone directories, and you've got absolutely loads and loads of records of all the different things in there, and it starts at A and goes through to Z. So a database is very much like that, and it holds a lot of information in the form of record tables of records and then smaller units of those records. When you're asked about the difference between data and protection, then they're talking about data is just raw data on a document, for example, put some headings around it, explanation, and then it becomes information. So that's what they're getting at there. They'll also ask you about roles. So some of the roles that they would talk about are a database specialist, the one who designs and creates a database. It's not an architect, and they will put architect in there, because obviously some ways of looking at some databases, there are architects involved, but with Access, we're not talking about architects. We've got database administrator. They do two different roles within that. They control the access of different levels to different people, and if the database crashes, they will recover it. So it's quite an important role. The end user, the database user, the inputter, they're the ones that enter and maintain data and retrieve information, which in other words, create queries. There is a hierarchy in a database. You've got the database at the top. Next come the table. The table is made up of records, and the records are made up of the smallest unit, which is a field. Database structure looks like this. So as we get into a database to have a look in a moment, you've got the main overall database at the top. It normally is given a name when it's created, and you don't go on to save it, different bits within it, as you would do with a spreadsheet and things like that, or Word document. Once it's saved, and then you create all the objects within it. Objects come from what we call the first original source, which are tables. The tables are the reams of records that you will see, and we'll have a look at that in a moment. And then forms come from those, queries come from those, and reports come from those. Forms, as we will see, the different things, forms are good for displaying and maintaining. So they work exactly the same way as records, have the same information on them, but they come up as one record. So you only see one record, not all of the records. So they're quite user-friendly and they're good for data protection. Reports are used to compile information ready for printing for lay people in meetings, etc. And queries are to extract and analyze data. So you want to look over particular data from a large database and then analyze that by using queries to give conditions and criteria, etc. So that takes us on to actually getting into a database. So there's some principles there. There's some more that you can practice on the practice paper after this. You can have a look at that. But what we're going to do now is we're going to actually go into Access. I'm just going to minimize that. And we're going to go in and have a look at this existing database that we're going to create together. So in part 1, you may not see it, but it is there on Aula as creating a database demo. So this is what we're going to do. It's a really simple database. It has a contacts table, employees table, one query, one form, and one report. So the tables, let's start with the employees. The employees table is the one that I would have started with, and we're going to do that together. So we've only put a little bit of information in there just to get us going. And then we're going to create together, we're going to do a query from it, a form from it. Here's our query. We've done what you call a criteria start date query. And a form whereby we can do exactly the same records but in a different format. Remember, we talked about a form being one record visually that you can see. And then we've got a report, and a report's done so that you can, they're compiled ready for printing and meetings. And I've also then added another table, which if you look at employees is related. So our employees and our contacts table are having a relationship. They're related. So if I close down these, we're going to have a go at this ourselves and get some idea. And then we're going to look at an existing database and get an idea of even more. So the way that those tables are related is through the database tools option here, and then the relationship. So we defined that relationship through these two tables, and we connect them up using referential integrity. We'll look at this later. If I double click on there, you can see that relationship. It's the same data type, the ID, so it's the same field and data type, and we've enforced referential integrity. So we've made that relationship between those two. But we'll get into this a bit more in a moment. So let's do this database ourselves and create it. So follow me together. So the first thing I'm going to do is find Access and open it up. Click on the blank database, just one click. If you double click, you'll go straight into it. And we need to name our database first. So we've got one called Employers. Let's do Employers 1, just so it's slightly different. At the moment, that's where it's navigating to. So we need to use the folder to browse and navigate to where we need to put it. Remember, in the exam, you'll be navigating to the Z drive, taking from the Z drive and saving to the Z drive. Here, I'm going to navigate onto my desktop and into my lecture files. So I'm going to put it into the part 1. I can just pop it outside there. And I'm going to call it Employer 1, which it is, and OK. And you can see where it's gone to. Then I can click on Create. When it creates its first table, it's like a template, it always puts table 1 in, but we can change that. So if you go to the design of it, we've got the front end here. This is where we will see the records. And if we go through this button here into the design view, click straight on the geometric figure, we're going to call it employees. Okay, we can put a 1 there as well, just to keep everything consistent, and OK. And then you notice that table 1 automatically changes to that. Now, when it comes to these fields here, what we're building down here is what we're going to see across the datasheet view at the front, at the top. So the first one can be, it's got a primary key. A primary key here, this little yellow key, represents a unique identifier. So a primary key would be an ID, it could be a payroll number, it could be your BCS number, something that relates to the record that no other person would have. So using date of birth, not good. Dog's name, not good. So you need to be using something very unique. We're going to use an ID, and instead of having it automatically entered for us, we're going to change it to a number so that we put it in. So our field name is ID, our data type is a number. Tab through and to the next one. So follow me, we're going to put in surname next. I'm going to take my time so you don't need to rush. Short text is the default and we're quite happy with that. Then we're going to put in forename, tab, short text again, quite happy with that. Date of birth next, DOB, but this time we're going to have a short date. We're going to choose a short date, date and time. There it is there. In order to make it a short date, we need to go down to the field properties. The field properties are what you change to make display. These will display what you see on the front end on the data sheet. So if I put in a short date, as I will demonstrate shortly, if I typed in a long date, it will automatically resort to a short date. So it keeps consistency. So once you click in there, it becomes available. You can't always see it. So there's our short date. And we've done that by clicking in date of birth and then dropping that to find short dates. But it's only applying to that one. Then our next one is going to be start date. Tab. We've got date again. And this time, remember, clicking in there, go down to the format, and we'll also put in a short date. Back up there, tab, tab, end date. Guess what? We're going to do a short date again. Tab through, and the last one we're doing is comment, which will be a short text because it's just text. So we've done that. Notice another thing that's going on while I'm in the comments. You've got field size for the characters. They are by default 255. If, however, you had a title, if we inserted a title in here, let's do a right in there, insert row and put in title, tab, short text. We could actually make that about 6 because you wouldn't get much more than a doctor with a title. So that means it would only take up 6 characters within that record. Okay, so now we're going to go to the datasheet view again. Remember that field properties, everything that's done in here affects the way that it looks on the other side. So what we've done down the field names in the design view is now showing across the top of the datasheet view. So ID, the first one we're going to put in, that's our unique identifier. That would be, remember, your BCS number, your payroll number, not your date of birth or your dog's name. It's got to be something very unique to you. We're just going to use a 1 just for quick purposes. So I'm going to use my name, the first record. To follow along with me, I'm going to use 12, 12, 1977. Tab, start date is going to be 12, 11, 015. Tab, no end date, no comment. That field doesn't need to be there. And then we're going to tab over until we get to the next one. So the next ID we're going to use. So we've got Mrs. for our second ID. We've got Smith, Susan, tab. And then we've got, if I just put in 4 without the 0, let's go back in there. If I put in a 4 and then a /7 / and 91, then when I tab it, hopefully it fixes it. So it puts it in exactly the same format as the previous one. So this is what that field properties does at the back end. It changes how things display, even if an inputter isn't doing things as they should. I can put 16 in and then tab, and it puts the 2016 in for me. Okay, so we're not going to put anything in the rest of them. We're going to come out and we're putting our third ID in. So our third one's Jones, not a lot of imagination me. Even fixed my Jones and I put it in a capital O. Have I done it wrong? Yeah, I need to go back and I need to put Mr. Jones. So this goes to show how you need to watch what you're doing. So Jones, tab, then we've got Brian, tab, date of birth here. Once again, if I do things 15/5/99, tab, it fixes it for me. If I did 15 November 16 and I tab, it once again fixes it for me. And I have an end date this time, 13/01/17/207. And the comment is late starter. And tab through. Okay, so we've now got our first bit of data for that. And what we're going to do next is we're going to create a form from that. So we're going to go into the Create tab. Whenever we need to create something, an object from a table, we need to use one of these. There's the query design, and there's the form for a simple form. There's a form wizard, report wizard. Our table design is over here. So that would be the first one that we use, table design. We designed the fields in the back, in the design area. I went through to the Datasheet View, which we're in at the moment, and put in some data. We use the query design when we need to use criteria, and I'll see that in a moment, because the query wizard will not allow us to stop to put any criteria in. It just creates a query based on template information that you give it. A simple form, you must remember, as we'll state again in the exam, just creates a table exactly how it is in the format of a form object. Doesn't change its name, doesn't change anything, exactly the same. If you do need to change its name or anything else, you need to use the form wizard. We're going to use that in a minute to do this one. And then for reports, we stick to the report wizard for the same reasons, gives the option to do lots of different things as we run through. So let's create a form, and let's go for a simple form. Exactly, I'm on the employees one, exactly as it is. Click on it, there you go, that's your form. And you can see the records across the bottom and back again. Now, if I use this drop, let's pull this out a little bit. See this drop down here? All access objects. If I drop that down, at the moment, it's filtered by group and it should show all access objects once I create this form. At the moment, it's just a table. So if I saved, that's our table. If I save this, I could call it employees one again. Okay. And then it appears here in the forms. If I took the object off there and just showed tables, then I wouldn't see the form. So make sure you always see all your access objects if you wish. I'm going to close that here, and we're going to do one using the form wizard, which would be the one you would generally use in the exam because they tend to ask you to change things. So back to Create tab. Form wizard is a little bit different. You say which table you're basing it on, and we know we're basing it on employees 1. You could take everything over, but I don't want that field 1. So say it's a bit of an error in there. So I could take everything over and push that one back. So I'm using a double arrow to take them all over, and then a single arrow to take back. Okay, so all over, and then that one goes back. Maybe I don't want the ID as well. So I'm just going to go with this for our form. Next, next. I might call it employees 2, different name. I might call it form and finish. And then you can see that we've got this form here. Okay, so we've got 2 different forms. If we want to close this, we can close. If we want to delete a form, we can click on it. As long as the form's closed, we can right click and delete our form there. Always double checks. We could go into here and we could delete that field because it's no good to us. It's an error. And now we're back to what we need. So what we're going to do next is we're going to create a query. So we've got a table and we've got a form. So the next object we're creating is a query design. So we're going to base the query on the start date. So what we need to do is click on the query design. It gives us a show table box that will show us what tables or queries, both, is that one, we have in our database. We're going to add the one we've got, employees 1, see it drop on the grid and close this box. Pull that down so you can see everything in it. We're going to drop things onto this grid so that we can run an extraction, a query. So I may just want an ID, a surname, a full name, and date of birth, and then maybe a start date. And it's the start date that I'm going to put the query in. So you can see these rows across the bottom. We've got sort in there. If you click on them, they will open up, but you don't see them doing anything until you do. You'll see later, we'll have a look at this again. This is show and hide. So I take that off the show and run the query. I can't see the ID in there. Then back into the query design. If I tick the ID on, even though it's still being used, I can see it on the query. So you've got show and hide. The start criteria, the start date criteria here, we're going to use is the 12/11/2016. Notice when I click in the grid away from that data, it gets some hashes around it. So it fixes it almost. In the exam, whenever you put criteria in, always click away anyway, and it will, if you're anywhere near what you need to be putting in that criteria, it will fix it for you. So it's quite good like that, as long as you're on the right track. Now if we run it, we just get the one record up who does have that start date. Unrun it, take the start date out, run it again, and we get everyone. We could try the 15/05/1999 one. So we could do 15/05/99. Click away again, run it, and I must have got one of my dates wrong. Let's take that out. Check it again. If it doesn't run correctly in the test, there's something wrong. That's because I picked up the date of birth instead of the start date. So remember that in the test, if you put the criteria into the wrong field and it doesn't run, then there's something wrong. So you can redo it as long as you don't hit the answer. Make sure you're in the right field. It's very easily done when they're very tight along here. So if you run it and you do come up with a record, you know you're on the right track. Okay, so that's our first query. The name box up here, if I hover on the one on the quick access toolbar, that's called a name box and a save when you hover on it. When you click on it, it gives you the option to bring up a way of naming your design area. So your design table will give you a way of naming it like that, and your query design will allow you to name it like this as well. So we're going to call it employees query. Oops, let's make sure I put my Y in. That's really important in all work, but particularly in databases. Things right. So we've now got our query, and we can close it, and it will stay there. Whenever we want to see our form, it's there, and whenever we want to see our query, we can see it and we can run it. Okay, I think I've just messed it. So notice that when you do things like that, you have to do an undo at the top of here, even in the exam, because Access will start throwing these error dialog boxes at you, and all you've done is just maybe delete something by accident or popped something in by accident like I did. So just undo to get out and escape. And if you're really in trouble in the exam, clearing that question down once per question is the last resort. So try not to if you can. Okay, so I'll just close that again. And we're back to our table. The final thing I'm going to demonstrate is using a report. So from the table again into the create, and we're going to use the report wizard. So we bring it up. It's very much like the form wizard here that we used. So it's based on that table again. We're going to take them all over, but maybe not take the ID over. So remember, double chevrons to take it all, single chevron to take it back. Okay, then next. Now in reports, they do them by grouping, so everything's under a particular grouped heading. So you can, if you're asked to group, we could group by start date. So we know everyone that in that start date under that remit. Then next, if you have a numerical field, you will get a summary option coming in here where you can do simple calculations like sum, average, min, max, etc. But there are no numerical fields in here. So next, and then we can call it quiz 1 report and finish. So now we have our report. You can see that these aren't wide enough, these areas here. We go, this is in print preview. Remember in Access you don't have a page layout page, so if you need to go into print previewing, you need to go through the file options to get there. So into the file and into there, and then you've got print preview, which will bring up things like your landscape, portrait, page setup, etc. So remember that, no page layout, that's how you get it. File and into print, and then print preview. Reports automatically, when they're created, come up in print preview. To close the preview, you close that and you see the design of the report, just like you saw the design of the table. So if these are too small, we can four-sided arrow drag them out. The one that I've just dragged out at the top is the heading. I'll show you, I'll go back to preview. That's the heading. So the data that goes with it, there isn't any data, needs to come down too. So I'll show you what I mean with regard to the date, birth date, etc. So if we drag the date over to there, let's just make sure that comment is below, then this date, the end date, because that's what that is, needs to come, drag it out with those two-sided arrows. And if I show you that on the front end, you can see now that the end dates come out, but it's still too small. So if we go into design again, drag that out, then you can now see that date is visual. So it's about making it, setting it out so it's nice and neat, tidy, and you can see it's been done under the start date here with the title. So this is the titles that I'm taking out. Okay, so that's reports. I'm just going to save that as it is. Remember, it's already been saved in the wizard. That's the beauty of the form wizard way and the report wizard way, is they save them as part of the wizard. And the name box up here, the save box, is the way that you would save a table design and a query design. I've created a contacts table just like Blue Peter, before we get there. All I've done is in the design area, I've just done an ID number, which we can use of our own, address line 1, address line 2, postcode, and I've not really done much with regard to field properties. I've left it very much as it is. So when you go back into the view, I popped in a couple of addresses, just made up so that we can see things in action. So if I close that, what I'm going to do, save it, I want to relate it, and take these off the grid so you can see me bring them on, and close relationships. And we're going to relate those two together so that they are connected. So those employees, we can see their contact details. So we go to the table-based tools tab onto relationships. Now, if this one wasn't there, if I delete that and I delete that, and we wanted to bring them on, if we go to show table, that brings up whatever tables, whatever queries, and both we have in our database. So you can highlight them both using a shift, add, and close the dialog box. So now they're there. I'm going to drag that onto that side because what I want to do is take the primary key ID and drop it onto the foreign key ID. Both the same data types, I want to join them up. So if I grab that with my mouse, drag it over and drop it right on top of the ID, like that. It's got one-to-many. I can enforce referential integrity. We'll talk about that in detail later, and create. So now I've got a relationship. I can close and save. And then when I open up my employees, that's the relationship I've just created. So I have every ID1. I had the address for ID1. For ID2, I had the address for ID2. So it's connecting up and making two tables instead of separated. I'd have to put the ID in both tables if I opened up to know more information about them. So that's a really good way. I'm just going to save that and close. So we're going to open up the demo clubs from the Aula lecture materials, and we're going to look at some other things by opening the clubs first. So there's some other things that we need to be aware of. Sometimes if a column's not wide enough, exactly like the other applications, you can use the auto fit, double click and it will fit. And then in the more here, you also have some field widths, row height, column widths, etc., all coming up in there. Okay. Other things you need to think about are find. Now the find is going to be this feature here. They always use the language search in the exam, never say find. And what they'll be doing is you'll expect to click in the column of data you're trying to find something in. Because with databases, as you can see, there's 120 there for a room number and there's 120 there for contact ref. So you need to know which one, it needs to know which one you're searching. So if you're searching a 120 contact ref, then you go to find and you put in your 120. And it says current field. So that's okay, find next, finish searching and cancel. So it's found it. Okay, so make sure if you forget and you do it in the exam, it doesn't find anything, that's probably what's happened. So make sure you do put your cursor in there. If you were doing a find on anything beginning with P, we could click in there and use an asterisk. So there's things called wildcards. Asterisks will stand for any character or data that follows. And question marks replace characters as in letters. So if you've got Joseph and Josephine, if you've got the J and you've only got so many characters that meet Joseph, you won't find the Josephine. So that's very specific. And then you use hashes to represent numbers. In this case, we're going to find next, and there it's done it straight away, and there's the painting. So that's anything beginning with P. So adding records, you tend to put a record at the end because it sorts as it does with database, a bit different to the other things that we've done. We did insert a field in the database design area. You can move things around. I can move that column. If I go into the design view, you can, as we did, insert there, delete that. You can grab it and change it to another place, and you can do that on both sides. But remember, once your database is related, it's a relational database, it's locked in. So sometimes when you try to do things with a table that has a relationship, it will start sort of throwing dialog boxes at you and saying, no, you're not doing this. I think I mentioned earlier that if we're in a field and the one at the field above, if you do a control and apostrophe, it will copy the above field. So that's another little thing that you can use. And in the date area, if you control and colon, you can put in today's date. Automatically shortcut keys. That's all on the slides. Everything I'm talking about is on the slide in a lot more detail. With regard to sorting, just like anywhere else, make sure, just put that in, undo. Do you remember it said it screams at you if you start putting things in and don't finish? So with regard to sorting, it's pretty much straightforward. There's your ascending, there's your descending. So you can do that with certain records if you wish or you're asked, and that will do it, or you can remove the sort. Okay, so if I click back in there, I can do it ascending. Other areas to think about are filters. So you've got the sort and filter group. We just had a quick look at the sorting. The filter, if I click on there and I click on filter, then it brings up the same sort of style of selection for filter on and off tick boxes that you use in Excel. So very simple filters. So if you wanted to filter this out, then you might just want to take the 100 out and you can't see it, and then you clear the filter or pop it back on again and it comes back in. So that's quite straightforward. That's a simple filter. The filter by selection, which is good too, is if you click in an area and right click, you get these options here. So you could have equal to £29 and then clear filter. You could have not equal 30, so you get everything else, and then you can clear there or clear on the other one. Doesn't really matter, it's all filtered. When it's filtered, you'll see a difference down here. So if I filter that to equal, to see how you can see it is filtered, and then you can clear the filter or you can clear it there. In the exam, sometimes they'll ask you to do a filter from the start of a database table or object, and then other times it will already be filtered and they'll ask you to remove something and you'll be able to see then whether it's filtered or not. So we've done simple filter, and filter by selection is also here. So you can do it that way as well, and then you can toggle. We'll clear the filter, put the filter on, take the filter off, put the last filter on, take the filter off. Okay, so that will work as well. The final one that they use is called filter by form. So filter by form means that you're looking for more than one criteria. So if I click in the selection, which table by selection 200, let's go for a contact ref of 200, and we've got a room number of 120. So we know that's what we're looking for. We can click anywhere. We're going to go to filter by form. I've got a contact ref of 200 and I've got a room of 120, but I haven't got anything there. Then when you toggle, it brings up anything that's got that data in it. According to that, more than one data, toggle off, back to normal, back in, etc. So you can see when I toggle, it's filtered, and then it's no longer filtered, it's unfiltered. So you've got simple filter, filter by selection, and filter by form, which is more than one filter. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to some of the objects. We're going to do some queries, form, and reports. And we're going to do all of that in part 2. So I'm